Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a complex stack of research notes and source material and transform it into the critical knowledge you need to be immediately well-informed.
Today, we are heading into the blistering heat and the real isolation of 1930s Iraq, ancient Mesopotamia, to dissect the mystery set against the backdrop of an archaeological dig.
This is one of Agatha Christie's most ingenious puzzles, a crime of, well, perfect logistics and absolutely devastating long-term psychology.
It really is.
Our sources give us an exhaustive look into the events, the suffocating isolation, the highly strained investigation, and then the ultimate, almost unbelievable reveal.
And our mission for you, the listener, is to analyze the bizarre physical constraints of this crime. We need to figure out not just who the killer was, but how a murder could be committed in a true isolation chamber.
A house where everyone was accounted for.
Exactly. And to expose the killer, who had been hiding in plain sight for years. It is a profound study. And what makes this deep dive so interesting is that the entire account is filtered through a narrator specifically chosen to be, and I'm quoting from the source material here,
Yeah.
not biased by having any previous connection with the team.
Right, an outsider's perspective.
And that perspective, which is designed for just pure common sense, ends up being the most crucial piece of evidence in the whole thing.
Let's unpack this narrator immediately. Nurse Amy Leatheran, the editor who recorded her account, had to, really push her to write this all down.
Right.
And the editor notes that because Leatheran is an outsider, she is an observant and intellectual eyewitness. But that description is almost ironic because her core strength isn't intellect, it's pragmatism.
That's the tension at the heart of the story.
Mm.
The editor is fascinated by her writing style because it shows this inner conflict. She's a professional, a real stickler for etiquette, but her human curiosity just keeps overriding her manners.
How so?
Well, the source notes that she refers to the great detective as both Poirot and then Mr. Poirot. It all depends on whether she remembers her professional manners in the moment or if she's just completely caught up in the human drama of it all.
So she's viewing this terrible event through the lens of a highly competent but emotionally unattached professional.
Precisely.
And we get a very detailed picture of the professional herself. Nurse Amy Leatheran is 32, highly trained at St. Christopher's, experienced in both maternity and private work. She just projects competence and solidity.
The exact opposite of the nervous patient she is hired to look after.
Yeah, the source says she has an erect, confident bearing and is robust, shrewd, and matter-of-fact.
And her presence in Iraq is, initially, just a coincidence. She'd accompanied Mrs. Kelsey and her baby to Baghdad, and she was basically planning to head home unless she found another job.
And this is where Dr. Leidner finds her. He interviews her for a job looking after his wife, Louise Leidner, who is extremely nervous and has fancies.
And what's fascinating is Leidner's explicit reasoning for choosing her. He tells her he wants her for her splendidly healthy and full of common sense demeanor.
So he's looking less for a traditional nurse and more for a psychological anchor. Someone whose sheer, unshakable practicality will counteract his wife's escalating emotional volatility.
This choice speaks volumes about Dr. Leidner's own mental state and what he thinks the problem is. He doesn't see it as a medical issue.
No, he thinks it's hysteria.
Exactly. Hysteria that needs to be counteracted by stolid English common sense. He's essentially hiring a professional skeptic to witness his wife's terror, which sets up the biggest red herring of the entire mystery.
He wants someone who will, by default, just dismiss the emotional evidence.
Yes.
So Nurse Leatheran, the common sense machine, is dropped into Iraq, and her initial assessment of Baghdad is fantastic because it just immediately undercuts any romantic expectations you might have.
Oh, absolutely. She writes to her friend, Sister Kershaw, saying, "The dirt and the mess. You wouldn't believe, and not romantic at all like you'd think from the Arabian Nights."
She is completely unimpressed by the lack of proper English shops and, the general atmosphere.
That grounded perspective is so crucial, as it keeps the entire narrative tethered to reality. And she applies that same pragmatic filter to Dr. Leidner.
What does she see?
She sees a man of middle height, with slightly stooping shoulders, a brown beard, and these gentle, tired eyes. She notes his characteristic perplexed manner, especially when he talks about his wife.
Murmuring that Louise imagines things and works herself up over nothing.
Yeah. He appears to be a man just completely weary of his domestic burden.
So once she's hired, the journey out to the dig, Tel Urimja, near Hassani, it really emphasizes the isolation.
It does. Leatheran describes the station wagon ride, the old bus,
Yeah.
as unbelievably rough. She says, jolting. I wonder if the whole contraption didn't fall to pieces.
And that's followed by a terrifying, craziest ferry boat crossing. They are literally putting themselves into the middle of nowhere.
And the location is designed to establish the crime scene as a true closed circle. The environment itself is contradictory, much like all the characters.
How so?
Well, Hassani looks quite white and fairy-like with minarets from a distance. But the moment they cross the bridge, the reality hits. Such a smell and everything ramshackle and tumble down and mud and mess everywhere.
That juxtaposition, then. Appearance versus reality.
Yes, the ideal versus the practical. It's a structural thread that runs right through the entire investigation.
And the architecture of the expedition house at Tel Yerimja is vital. It's built around a central courtyard, and most of the rooms open onto that courtyard.
And the critical detail, which the police will rely on, is that the rooms in the original south building that face the outside countryside have their windows barred on the outside.
That external barrier is the investigator's rock. It solidifies the inside job theory. If the windows are barred and fastened, and the only entrance is through the archway guarded by servants,
then the murderer must be someone already inside the compound. This geometric certainty focuses all suspicion inward onto this very tight-knit team.
So let's meet this team. It's a mixed nationality crew led by Dr. Leidner, the archaeologist who comes across as utterly modest and unassuming, and his wife, Louise Leidner.
And Louise, the patient, is immediately identified as the catalyst for all the rising tension. She is described as possessing this undeniable charm and beauty with dark violet eyes.
But Nurse Leatheran pretty quickly overhears Major Kelsey's wife labeling her lovely Louise and possibly in Lumsos.
For those unfamiliar, that's a French term, roughly meaning a flirt or someone who deliberately leads men on without any real intention of following through.
So she's clearly a polarizing figure who easily makes enemies.
Very easily.
And the rest of the staff are an assortment of what are described as a few odd fish.
A great description.
You have Richard Carey, the English architect, an old hand who looks deeply strained and tired. Miss Johnson, also English, is the capable general assistant, absolutely devoted to Dr. Leidner, almost in a proprietary way.
Then there's Father Lavigne, a French father, new to the expedition, who's there to catalog inscriptions. He's noted for his great black beard and shrewd, observant eyes.
And the Americans. Carl Reiter, the plump, shy, clumsy photographer, and David Emmett, the quiet, taciturn assistant who's been there for 2 seasons.
And Emmett is going to become very important later on. He's the ultimate observer.
Finally, the Mercados. Squadron leader Kelsey refers to them using a pretty xenophobic term of the era.
He does. He calls them Dagos of some kind, which is a derogatory label that, it highlights the prejudice of the time and the military officer who used it, not us. But we have to note it's the initial perception of these characters.
Right. It tells you more about Kelsey than the Mercados. Joseph Mercado is tall, thin, and melancholy, and his wife, Marie Mercado, is young, snaky-looking, and pointedly, she hates lovely Louise.
The house is not just isolated. It's a pressure cooker of simmering resentments.
And this atmosphere of tension is so thick, it's immediately noticeable to every single outsider who visits.
Yeah, Major Pennyman observes that when he visited, nobody seemed quite natural. There was a queer atmosphere of tension. They all passed the butter to each other too politely.
That forced courtesy masking deep dislike.
It's a brilliant observation. And this isn't just one person's subjective view. Nurse Leatheran, relying on her years of experience in hospital communities, she agrees. She notes that when people are too much cooped up together, it's got a way of getting on their nerves.
And Dr. Riley's daughter, Sheila, also corroborates. She says the staff all got the jumps. They all watch each other. So you have 3 independent, objective views, all confirming that the psychological storm gathering is absolutely real.
No question.
The narrative then centers on Louise Leidner's nervous terrors. Mrs. Mercado, who is clearly spiteful and seems to enjoy detailing Louise's misfortunes, tells Nurse Leatheran about her delusions.
What kind of delusions?
Phantom fingers tapping on the window, a disembodied hand, and a yellow face pressed against the window. Mrs. Mercado openly suggests these are just hysterical fancies that Dr. Leidner unwisely encourages.
And that suggestion is a highly effective red herring. But the reality Louise later reveals to Amy Leatheran is far more terrifying.
Right. She explains her full backstory. In 1918, she married a man named Frederick Bosner, an American spy working for Germany.
And she betrayed him out of a sense of patriotic idealism, leading to his presumed death by firing squad.
He supposedly escaped, only to be killed in a train wreck soon after, which confirmed his death. But years later, when she showed affection for another man, the letters started.
These were threatening, anonymous letters written in a womanish hand with a forward slant, containing a terrifying, unequivocal warning: "You have got to die."
They were explicitly designed to terrorize her into obeying her dead husband's vow that she must be Frederick Bosner's wife only.
And Dr. Leidner admits he knew she was threatened. He tried to rationalize the letters, suggesting they were either a very elaborate hoax, a cynical blackmail attempt, or maybe possibly from Bosner himself.
But crucially, he explicitly refused to believe in real danger.
And this refusal leads to his later devastating, self-lacerating admission of guilt. He says, "I didn't believe all along I didn't believe." He failed to protect her because he just rationalized away the threat.
But the psychological twist, the critical seed of doubt planted in the narrative, it comes from Nurse Leatheran herself.
This is a huge moment.
She happens to see a letter Louise amended and realizes that Mrs. Leidner's handwriting, though it's generally bigger, was extraordinarily like the writing on the anonymous letters.
This is a massive realization. It introduces the possibility of self-dramatization, that Louise was writing them herself, indulging in the role of the persecuted heroine, especially since we know she craved attention and drama.
And Dr. Leidner's curious, almost searching tone when he asked Leatheran what she thought of the situation, it suggests he might have half suspected this fact, too.
It completely flips the script. If the campaign of terror is self-generated, then the entire structure of the threat is based on a lie, and the supposed outside killer motive is weakened.
But the danger remains, because if she is faking the threat, someone else within the house could easily use that hysterical narrative as a perfect cover for their own separate agenda.
And the surrounding incidents just keep the waters muddy. For instance, Louise and Amy witness a terrifying sighting: an Iraqi man standing on tiptoe, peering into the barred windows.
But when Louise realizes he is only an Iraqi, she relaxes instantly, which confirms she feels a definite flesh and blood person, and not a supernatural phantom. She fears someone she knows is hunting her.
Then you have the strange behavior of the staff. Father Lavigny, the French monk, calls Louise ruthless and dangerous, but yet she is afraid.
That's highly unusual language for a newcomer. It suggests either deep personal knowledge or some profound moral judgment.
There's also the light scene in the Antica room at night, which Father Lavigny claimed was just him taking down boxes. Then Mr. Mercado is found mysteriously asleep in the laboratory.
And his wife angrily questions Nurse Leatheran about going into the lab for acetone, suggesting she suspects Leatheran of spying on them.
Louise's polarizing character is key to this entire tension build. She acts as a lightning rod for everyone's suppressed emotions.
Miss Johnson, the capable assistant, admires Louise's beauty but fiercely believes she unsettles things and admits to professional jealousy, feeling Louise took Dr. Leidner's devotion for granted.
And then you have the extremes. Bill Coleman, the jovial young assistant, he initially disliked her but ended up completely captivated, describing her like a fairy woman who could lure you away.
And Sheila Riley, the doctor's daughter, absolutely despises her. She calls her a catwoman who enjoyed breaking up things always, delighting in experimenting with people's emotions, and driving people like Mercado into a white-hot frenzy.
Which brings us to Richard Carey. On the surface, he expresses a sort of professional dislike for Louise.
But the gossip contradicts him entirely. Sheila Riley insists he was secretly head over ears in love with her, and that they were meeting privately among the fruit trees.
So this conflicting evidence immediately places him in the prime position for a crime-passional suspect. A motive born of either intense hate or desperate, unrequited love. The stage is just perfectly set for an eruption.
The psychological pressure finally breaks on a Saturday afternoon. Nurse Leatheran is in her room, ironically, reading a mystery novel called Death in a Nursing Home.
A nice little meta touch there.
Right. And Dr. Leidner, seemingly cheerful and calm, goes up to the roof to sort pottery finds.
The time frame here has to be treated like a forensic science puzzle. Dr. Riley estimates death occurred between 1:15 p.m. and 1:45 p.m. Nurse Leatheran had been resting from 12:45 p.m. to 2:4 p.m.
And crucially, she heard nothing unusual. No struggle, no shout, only the monotonous pot boy's chant and Emmett shouting up to Leidner on the roof.
Dr. Leidner is the one who discovers the body. He enters his wife's room as a brisk, cheerful man and emerges like a drunken one, calling out "nurse" in a queer, hoarse voice.
And Louise is found in a dreadful huddled heap by the bed, killed instantly by a terrific blow on the front of the head just over the right temple.
And the room is otherwise undisturbed. Most critically, the barred windows were closed and securely fastened.
So the investigation immediately hinges on the alibis for that 45-minute window. We have to methodically break down where everyone was.
It's the only way to confirm the closed-circle nature of the crime.
Leidner swore he was on the roof and never came down. Mr. Emmett was in the courtyard, overseeing the potboy, Abdullah, constantly moving between the courtyard and assisting Leidner on the roof.
Mercado was in the laboratory, Mrs. Mercado in her bedroom, shampooing her hair. Ms. Johnson was taking seal impressions in the living room. Ryder was in the dark room developing plates, and Father Lavigne was in his room working on tablets.
So only Carey, who was on the main dig site, and Coleman, who was in Hassani collecting payroll money, were truly outside the house complex.
But the timeline contains a catastrophic gap. The fatal 10 minutes.
The fatal 10 minutes, right. Emmett confirms he went up to the roof with Leidner for a solid 10-minute stretch, around 1:30 p.m., to discuss pottery sorting.
And during that short period, the potboy Abdullah seized his chance to be idle, stepping away to gossip outside the archway.
Which left the entire courtyard, and thus the entrance to Louise's room, completely unwatched.
And this is the inescapable conclusion Captain Maitland and Dr. Riley reach, based on the house's geometry and the testimony of the guards and houseboys. No stranger entered the courtyard.
Therefore, the murderer didn't come from outside, so he must have come from inside.
It looks as though Mrs. Leitner must have been murdered by a member of your own expedition. They have solved the who's someone inside, but are now paralyzed by the which one.
This is when Hercule Poirot makes his entrance, almost miraculously.
Dr. Riley informs the staff it's an amazing coincidence.
Yeah.
Poirot, having been disentangling some military scandal in Syria, is passing through Hassani on his way to Baghdad.
And Poirot's arrival immediately shifts the dynamic from a local police procedural to this high-level psychological analysis. He forces the staff to acknowledge their collective situation.
With a challenge. In a house where murder has been committed, every inmate comes in for a certain share of suspicion. He just strips away their pretenses of being devoted colleagues.
His systematic approach immediately focuses on the anonymous letters, treating them as the central key.
Right. He posits 3, and only 3, possible theories for who wrote them. 1. Mrs. Leidner wrote them herself for drama.
2. Frederick Bosner, the dead husband who would be in his 50s, or his younger brother, William Bosner, wrote them as a genuine threat.
Or 3. A third person, someone aware of the letters and the terror, is the murderer, and they're just using the Bosner story as a perfect psychological shield.
He then uses the age constraints of the potential Bosners to narrow the list of plausible suspects who could be one of them.
He quickly discounts the women and Richard Carey, who at 38 or 39 is the wrong age for either role. This is pure deductive elimination.
And it leaves the remaining 4 male candidates who could plausibly be one of the Bosners, hiding under a false name and identity.
Father Lavigne, Mr. Mercado, Carl Ryder, and David Emmett. The entire expedition is now reduced to 4 plausible assassins, plus the 3 who are only motivated by jealousy or passion.
Poirot next conducts his inspection of Mrs. Leidner's room. It's simple. An iron bed, minimal furniture, no easy hiding places. But the books on her shelf provide key psychological data.
What's she reading?
Who are the Greeks? Introduction to Relativity, Life of Lady Hester Stanhope, Back to Methuselah, Linda Condon, Crew Train.
These are not the books of a hysterical fool. They confirm she was intellectual, well-read, and particularly interested in independent, unencumbered women like Lady Hester Stanhope.
So this implies she was far from a passive victim. She was a woman with a considerable ego and ambition, even if she channeled some of that energy into domestic drama.
And the most crucial question Poirot poses is based on the physical evidence, or lack thereof. There was no sign of a struggle.
Right. If the killer was a stranger, the presumed Frederick Bosner, why did Mrs. Leidner not cry out for help the moment she saw him?
This lack of resistance means she must have known her killer intimately. She must have been completely unsuspicious when he entered the room during that 10-minute window when the courtyard was empty.
It suggests absolute trust, or a familiarity that immediately disarmed her fear.
Poirot's genius lies in stripping away the protective layers the staff have built up. He starts by challenging the conflicting accounts of the Iraqi stranger seen peering in the window.
Nurse Leatheran described him as tall, slender, and very dark.
But Father Lavigne insisted the man was short, squarely built, fair-complexioned, and had a very noticeable squint.
The disparity is so intentional, so glaring, that Poirot knows Father Lavigne is actively lying and misleading the investigation.
This establishes that Lavigne is either protecting the murderer or, more likely, protecting a secret of his own that is non-murderous but highly criminal. We'll definitely come back to the monk later.
Let's turn to Richard Carey. When Poirot applies pressure, Carrie breaks down dramatically, giving what seems like the perfect false confession.
What does he say?
I hated Louise Leidner. There's the truth for you. I hated her like hell.
The source material positions him as the classic red herring for a passionate crime. His confessed hate is the perfect foil for the rumored love.
And Sheila Riley's gossip, that he was secretly meeting Louise and was head over ears in love with her, paints him as the ideal suspect for a crime of sudden, jealous passion.
Especially because he was so devoted to Dr. Leidner, and Louise seemed to treat that devotion with contempt. But Poirot sees this as too simple, too obvious.
Next, the Mercados, a couple defined by extreme tension. Joseph Mercado is jumpy, and Marie Mercado watches him with a constant, watchful look like a tigress.
Poirot needs a truth, not a confession, and he uses a brilliant psychological tactic. He performs a discreet test, stinging Mr. Mercado with a long, sharp darning needle disguised as a pin right in front of Nurse Leatheran.
And the result confirms Poirot's suspicion. Hypodermic marks on Mercado's arm, confirming he is a drug addict in an advanced stage of the craving.
This completely changes Maria Mercado's motive. Her constant watchful fear wasn't general jealousy. It was the terror that Louise, who enjoyed flicking him on the raw, would expose his addiction, threatening his career and their entire life.
The motive here is powerful protection, not just simple jealousy. Poirot successfully extracted a deep, shameful truth without needing a confession.
What about Bill Coleman, the jovial young assistant?
He was seen by Sheila Riley rushing back early from Hassani and furtively searching a wadi near the house. He claimed he was searching for a lost cylinder seal, an easily accepted truth, yet suspiciously concealed.
And Poirot uses this to assess Coleman's nature, noting that Coleman once admitted he would have made a good forger. Again, this hints at a capacity for deception, keeping him on the suspect list.
David Emmett, the quiet American, he frustrates Poirot because he offers no emotional leverage. He is taciturn, suggesting he knew her for exactly what she was, but refuses to comment.
Emma's comparison of Louise to the Snow Queen, who enjoyed taking little Kay for a ride, suggests he viewed her as a cold, dangerous manipulator, capable of destroying lives for sport. But this provides no discernible motive for murder on his part. He's the observer who won't share his observations.
Finally, the elaborate secret of Father Levernier. Nurse Leatheran mentions one specific detail found in the Antiqa room after Levernier claimed he was taking down boxes there.
What was it?
Wax. Wax found on a beautiful gold drinking cup.
And this is where Poirot's international knowledge kicks in. The wax confirmed that Father Levernier was an imposter, and not just any imposter. He is actually Raoul Meunier, a famous French museum thief. His specialty was swapping priceless antiquities with clever forgeries called electrotypes.
We should probably spend a moment on electrotypes, because they are key to Meunier's deception. What exactly are they, and why are they such a threat to an archaeological dig?
Well, electrotypes are essentially perfect metal copies created through electrolysis. They replicate the surface texture, the weight, even minor flaws of the genuine artifact with incredible precision.
So they would be undetectable to the naked eye.
Often, yes. Meunier would use his position as an epigraphist, someone who studies inscriptions, to gain access to the most valuable, newly unearthed tablets and gold objects. He would swap the genuine article with the high-quality fake, and the forgery would sit on the shelf undetected, sometimes for decades, while he escaped with the real prize.
So his entire presence in the expedition was a massive, high-level criminal operation, masquerading as religious and academic duty.
Exactly. This changes the pool of suspects entirely, suggesting that a professional criminal who would have no compunction about using violence to protect his haul was in the house.
But was Meunier the one with the motive to kill Louise Leidner specifically? It seems unlikely she knew his secret, unless she just stumbled upon him making a swap.
The danger, however, is not confined to the long-term past or professional crime. It erupts again immediately after Louise's funeral, signaling that the murderer is still among them and still active.
Right. Miss Johnson, who had always maintained this veneer of perfect English competence, is found utterly broken down, weeping uncontrollably in Dr. Leidner's office.
And then she violently burns a crumpled piece of paper. She snatches from Nurse Leatheran a paper that must have contained either a piece of the anonymous letters or a draft of Dr. Leidner's private thoughts.
Leatheran has a chilling realization. Miss Johnson, fueled by her extreme devotion to Dr. Leidner and her dislike of Louise, may have been the author of some of the anonymous letters herself.
It was her twisted way of protecting Dr. Leidner by terrorizing Louise into leaving him.
Exactly. Now, Miss Johnson realizes with horror that her own letters have merely established a convenient false narrative, an outside killer that is shielding the actual murderer who used the cover. She feels immense remorse because her lie led to the murder of the woman she hated.
And Miss Johnson's fate is sealed when she stumbles upon the structural solution to the crime.
The next afternoon, while puzzling over the geometry of the house from the roof, she has a flash of realization. She says, "I've just seen something. I've seen how someone could come in from outside and no one would ever guess."
She hurries down the stairs, resolving to think it out first, a fatal delay born of her precise, cautious nature.
She is silenced almost immediately. She dies shortly after, poisoned by a strong solution of hydrochloric acid, which she drank from her bedside water glass in the dark.
This suggests calculated murder, not suicide, confirming Poirot's sinister theory that murder is a habit. The killer, having succeeded once, strikes again to silence the only person who had intellectually grasped the method.
Her dying words, tragically specific, are all Nurse Leatheran can record. "The window, nurse, the window."
And the killer's next move is terrifyingly calculated to achieve the perfect solution. The second murder is brutally staged to frame Miss Johnson for the first.
Captain Maitland finds a heavy stone quern, a massive, ancient stone grinder used for crushing grain or pottery, which is confirmed to be the murder weapon for Mrs. Leidner, complete with hair and tissue samples planted under Miss Johnson's bed.
The implication the killer wants the police to reach is clear. Miss Johnson murdered Louise out of jealousy, used the quern, hid it, and then, overcome with remorse, took her own life with acid. It's a neat, contained package designed to eliminate the only witness and stop the investigation cold.
And complicating matters, Father Levigny Raoul Minier vanishes at the exact same time.
Mrs. Mercado, hysterical with fear, screams that the monk is a madman with religious mania who thinks women are sinful and that she is next. This provides yet another narrative. Perhaps the museum thief turned zealous maniac is the killer.
But Poirot remains calm. He receives a telegram from Tunis confirming his investigation into the imposter. Meunier, the professional thief, is confirmed to be fleeing, caught later trying to board a steamer in Beirut.
So the implication is that Meunier wasn't the killer. He simply recognized that his highly criminal identity was exposed by the murder investigation, and he needed to run before the police focused on his electrotypes.
Which means the identity of the killer, the true mastermind, remains masked by that single, seemingly unbreakable alibi.
The narrative tension peaks as Poirot prepares to deliver his final analysis. He realizes his my amazing mistake.
He and the police had spent days exhaustively testing the alibis of the staff, the servants, and the two young men who were outside the house.
But they missed the core structural flaw in their reasoning. They assumed that Dr. Leidner's alibi that he was on the roof sorting pottery must be true.
Because he was the bereaved husband and the head of the expedition, the most trusted figure in the entire compound.
Dr. Leidner's alibi was worthless too. It relied only on Emmett's testimony that Leidner was near the sorting table, not that he was inert for that 10 minutes.
The truth is devastatingly simple and relies entirely on the architecture Miss Johnson saw. Dr. Leidner could murder his wife from the roof without leaving it. The murder was entirely vertical.
It exploited the geometry of the courtyard, the roof, and the victim's position directly beneath the parapet.
Let's walk through this step by step, because this is the genius of the crime.
Please.
Leidner ensures Emmett is talking to him on the roof, covering the noise of his movements, and watching the courtyard until he sees the potboy Abdullah sees his chance to be idle and leave his post. The courtyard is now empty for 10 minutes.
He'd prepared. He retrieves a cord and the object he previously used to terrorize his wife, a plasticine-smeared mask on a cord. He dangles this mask over the edge of the roof parapet and taps it on the barred window of Louise's room directly beneath him.
When Louise looks up in terror at the familiar phantom face, the exact image she had described as a yellow face pressed against the window, she's disarmed and distracted.
She doesn't scream because she expects the apparition, not a physical attack. At that moment, Leidner drops the heavy stone quern, which had a cord already passed through a hole in it, directly onto her head.
The sheer force collapses her onto the rug underneath the window. Leidner immediately hauls the quern back up to the roof via the cord, replaces it among the pottery, and resumes his work, all within the 10-minute window.
And Emmett, returning to the roof, only saw Leidner's torso and head above the parapet and assumed he was continuously working. The murder was committed without Leidner ever breaking his alibi or entering the room.
But his actions didn't stop there. He waited an hour, then descended, staging his distraught discovery, ensuring he had full control of the scene before calling the nurse.
He closed and fastened the barred window, reinforcing the idea that no one could have entered.
And the final critical staging maneuver, he swapped the rug stained by Louise's internal bleeding, just a slight dark stain, with the cleaner rug from the washstand.
Why do that?
Because if the stain was noticed, it would be wrongly connected to the washstand area, not the impact point directly underneath the window. He expertly managed the small forensic details to ensure the window was dismissed as the entry point.
Now, the motive, which is the ultimate psychological twist.
Dr. Leidner is Frederick Bosner.
He had staged his death 15 years prior, using a disfigured body from a train wreck. He fell in love with Louise again, the very woman who had betrayed him, and married her.
But he realized her character had not changed. She was still volatile, still capable of betrayal, still manipulative. His devotion had curdled into a devastating long-term obsession.
So he was trapped in a self-made prison, unable to reveal his true identity, yet unable to tolerate her existence. The source paints him as an obsessed fanatic plotting to kill, to keep her exclusively his, even if that meant her death.
He resumed the anonymous letters to leverage the paranoia he knew she was capable of generating.
And that paranoia was real, in part because Louise did write some of the later anonymous letters herself, using the established threat narrative to create drama and indulge her need to be the persecuted heroine.
But Leidner wrote the final Iraq-stamped threats, perfectly resuming his terror campaign using the self-created story she had built for him.
And Miss Johnson's death was merely house cleaning.
She must have discovered an unfinished draft of a letter written by Leidner, not an anonymous one, but a personal one, confirming he was the originator of the terrorizing campaign. And later, on the roof, she realized the specific physics of the house meant he killed his wife from the roof.
So Leidner realized she knew the method. He killed her with a quickly available hydrochloric acid, a common chemical used in archaeology for cleaning, and framed her with the quern to achieve the perfect solution.
Framing the only witness who possessed the intellectual key to the crime, and simultaneously wrapping up the investigation with a neat explanation of jealousy and remorse. It's an act of spectacular intellectual arrogance.
It is utterly impossible to discuss this mystery without acknowledging how deeply it is rooted in Agatha Christie's own life. The book is dedicated to Christie's many archaeological friends in Iraq and Syria.
And the story is a direct reflection of Christie's life traveling with her second husband, Max Mallowan, a distinguished archaeologist. We know that Mallowan himself served as the inspiration for David Emmett,
The quiet assistant archaeologist, who is described as the best and most dispassionate judge of Mrs. Leidner's personality.
And the sources suggest the victim, Louise Leidner, may have been influenced by Catherine Woolley, the wife of archaeologist Leonard Woolley. Christie was apparently quite nervous about the perceived resemblance.
Right. Knowing how easy it is for observers to draw conclusions about people working in such close, isolated quarters. The environment itself gave Christie endless material.
What's also fascinating for those who follow Christie's canon is the specific timing of Poirot's arrival. His presence in Hassania is explained by him disentangling some military scandal in Syria.
This is more than just a throwaway line. It establishes a specific, immediate literary continuity.
That military scandal is the background detail mentioned at the very beginning of Murder on the Orient Express, which was published the same year.
Right, and the narrator of Murder in Mesopotamia confirmed this connection, stating that M. Poirot went back to Syria and about a week later, quote, went home on the Orient Express and got himself mixed up in another murder.
That phrase, got himself mixed up in another murder, is the setup, the actual literary staging of the beginning of the most famous train mystery in history.
It places Mesopotamia and its isolated vertical crime immediately before the famous enclosed train-bound crime, showing Poirot moving from one high-stakes constrained environment to the next.
This deep dive gives us critical structural insights far beyond just the plot points. First, the importance of the flawed or, naive narrator, Nurse Leatheran.
She was hired for her common sense, which led her to record the raw, unfiltered facts, the contradictory handwriting, the rug swap, the final whisper that the more intellectual police investigators completely missed.
Second, the isolation. The desert, the barred windows, the central courtyard. It created a unique prison that initially pointed only to the 7 people inside.
It forced Poirot to analyze every secret addiction, passion, professional theft to uncover the one truth that mattered, the 15-year lie.
And third, the genius of the murder method. It utilized the simple physics of the house, exploiting the vertical space and the absolute trust Dr. Leidner commanded. It was literally a crime committed over the heads of the witnesses.
Ultimately, the entire tragedy rests on that final psychological layer.
Yeah.
The murder was not a fit of rage, but a continuous long-term self-justifying obsession masked by devotion and kindness.
The disparate facts, the letters, the mask, the rug, the window, the alibi, all cohered perfectly because the man we trusted most was hiding the ultimate 15-year truth about his identity.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought, rooted in Nurse Leatheran's reflection. She says, having witnessed the unraveling of the dig, murder is a habit, and that she is starting to get sorrier for everyone, even the killer.
So, if Dr. Leidner, or Frederick Bosner, truly believed he was protecting Louise from her own self-destructive nature, where does obsession end and devotion begin?
And if the common sense of an experienced nurse was almost enough to overlook the evidence of a 15-year lie, what hidden pervasive obsessions might you overlook in your own pursuit of the common sense truth? What deception is occurring right over your head simply because you trust the person standing on the roof?
A truly unsettling question worth considering. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.